What if the first person Jesus forgave on the cross was Judas? For 2,000 years, Judas has been remembered as the disciple who betrayed Christ. His name became synonymous with treachery, greed, and unforgivable guilt. But while the world condemned Judas, Jesus spoke only one sentence: "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." What if those words included more people than we have ever imagined? Stay until the end, because this single verse may force you to rethink one of Christianity's oldest assumptions. Script. Among all the words Jesus spoke from the cross, one stands above the others in its simplicity and in its mystery. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." At first glance, the meaning seems obvious. Jesus is asking forgiveness for the Roman soldiers, perhaps for the religious leaders, perhaps for the crowd, but the verse never gives us a list of names. It simply says, "Forgive them." And that raises an uncomfortable question. Who exactly was included in that prayer? Could Judas have been one of them? For centuries, Christian tradition has separated Judas from everyone else. The soldiers received sympathy because they were following orders. The crowd is portrayed as manipulated. Pilate hesitates. Even Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, is restored. But Judas becomes something different. He becomes the symbol of absolute betrayal, the man beyond forgiveness, the disciple whose name itself became a warning. Yet there is something strange about that conclusion, because Jesus never excluded him. Think carefully about the timing. When Jesus pronounces those words from the cross, the machinery of his execution is already in motion. The betrayal, the arrest, the trial, the beatings, the crucifixion. Everything that had happened involved countless people, different motives, different levels of responsibility, different degrees of understanding. Yet Jesus responds with a single prayer. They do not know what they are doing. Not, they knew exactly what they were doing. Not, forgive everyone except Judas. Just, they. That single word changes everything. Because if ignorance becomes the basis for forgiveness, how much did Judas truly understand? Did he fully comprehend the consequences of his actions? Or was he, like everyone else, trapped inside a story larger than himself? The Gospels present Judas as a deeply complex figure. Yes, he accepted the silver. Yes, he identified Jesus. But shortly afterward, something unexpected happens. He regrets what he has done. He returns the money. He openly declares, "I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood." This is not the confession of someone celebrating evil. It is the collapse of someone overwhelmed by what has happened. Was Judas guilty? The text certainly presents him as responsible. But responsibility is not the same as complete understanding. And Jesus' prayer introduces precisely that possibility. They do not know. This raises another question. If the people surrounding the cross did not fully understand, could the disciple who set those events in motion also have failed to understand? Perhaps Judas believed Jesus would escape. Perhaps he expected divine intervention. Perhaps he imagined the authorities would merely question him. The Gospels never tell us exactly what Judas expected. They only tell us what actually happened. And afterward, they tell us he was consumed by remorse. Now consider the larger paradox. The crucifixion stands at the center of Christian faith. Without the arrest, there is no trial. without the trial, there is no cross. Without the cross, there is no resurrection. If every event moved history toward that moment, then every participant became part of something far greater than themselves. Some acted out of fear, some out of ambition, some out of political calculation, some out of religious certainty, some simply followed orders. Yet Jesus answers all of them with one extraordinary prayer: Father, forgive them. Notice what he does not say. He does not ask whether each individual deserves forgiveness. He does not separate the guilty from the less guilty. Instead, he points to something deeper: human blindness. They do not know what they are doing. This is not merely a statement about information. It is a statement about the human condition. People often believe they understand their actions, while remaining blind to their ultimate consequences. Perhaps this is why the story of Judas continues to disturb us, because Judas forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about ourselves. How often have we acted with confidence, only to discover later that we misunderstood everything? How often have our intentions produced consequences we never imagined? How often have certainty and ignorance existed together? Maybe Judas is not disturbing because he was uniquely evil. Maybe he is disturbing because he reflects something profoundly human. This perspective does not erase responsibility, nor does it declare Judas innocent. The biblical text never says that, but it does invite us to distinguish between condemnation and forgiveness. Those are not always the same thing. Justice exists. Consequences exist. Yet Jesus' first words from the cross are not words of vengeance. They are words of mercy. Perhaps that is the greatest paradox of all. The man remembered for betrayal may have been prayed for before history finished judging him, not because betrayal was insignificant, but because mercy speaks before condemnation. And if Christ's prayer truly embraced everyone who acted in ignorance, then perhaps its reach was wider than we have dared to imagine. The question then is no longer simply whether Judas was forgiven. The deeper question is this: when Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them," who are we to decide where that prayer ends? Final CTA: if this perspective challenged what you've always believed, don't stop here. The Bible often becomes even more fascinating when we begin asking the questions that history stopped asking. Because sometimes the most powerful truths are hidden, not in the answers we've inherited, but in the questions we've been afraid to ask.